New CEO fired me for being too careful with renewable energy solutions. What happened next changed everything. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Cleantech Innovations' Portland headquarters, casting long shadows across the open-plan workspace. I remember that day with crystal clarity, the day everything I'd built over 15 years began to unravel. My name is Daniel Harper, and I've spent my entire career believing that true innovation isn't about speed, but about getting things right. At 47, I was the lead environmental engineer, the architect of a revolutionary modular energy system that had the potential to transform how communities approach sustainable infrastructure. Cleantech wasn't just another startup. We were different. While other companies chased quick wins and flashy presentations, we'd spent years developing a nuanced approach to renewable energy. Our technology wasn't just about generating power, it was about creating adaptive solutions that could integrate seamlessly with diverse environmental contexts. I joined the company when it was nothing more than a small team with big dreams. Back then, we were cramped in a converted warehouse, our whiteboards covered with complex diagrams and our coffee mugs perpetually empty. I took a significant pay cut, trading my stable government research position for a chance to make a real difference. My wife, Elena, supported me completely. "Someone has to push the boundaries," she'd said, her faith in me unwavering. Over the years, I'd become more than just an engineer. I was the institutional memory, the person who understood every intricate detail of our technology. My colleagues called me obsessive, but I preferred the term meticulous. Every prototype, every design iteration was a carefully constructed solution born from thousands of hours of research, field testing, and continuous refinement. The modular energy system I'd developed wasn't just a product. It was a comprehensive approach to sustainable infrastructure. Unlike traditional solar or wind solutions that offered one-size-fits-all approaches, our technology could adapt to specific local environmental conditions. A solution for a coastal community in Oregon would look completely different from one designed for the arid landscapes of New Mexico. This approach took time, extensive simulations, rigorous testing, constant refinement. We might release one major iteration per year, while our competitors were pushing out new models quarterly, but our success rate was unprecedented. 0 major failures, 0 environmental compromises. Then Marcus Reynolds arrived. He was the epitome of the modern tech CEO, young, aggressive, with a portfolio of rapidly scaled startups that had impressed our board. From the moment he walked into our first all-hands meeting, I could sense the impending collision of philosophies. "We need to accelerate," he'd proclaimed, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory intensity. "Our competitors are moving twice as fast. We're being left behind." I'd heard this rhetoric before. These were the words of executives who understood spreadsheets but not science, who saw innovation as a race to be won rather than a delicate process of discovery and responsible development. When I raised my concerns, explaining the intricate testing our modular systems required, Marcus's smile never reached his eyes. "Daniel," he said, his tone patronizing, "we've disrupted entire industries with this approach. At Solar Drive and Wind Nova, we scaled rapidly and successfully. The other team leads nodded. I recognized the look, a mixture of fear and ambition. Nobody wanted to contradict the new CEO, nobody except me. My reputation within Cleantech was built on a simple principle: we don't cut corners. Our technology wasn't just about generating renewable energy, it was about doing so responsibly, with a holistic understanding of environmental impact. Each prototype went through rigorous testing. That could take months, sometimes years. Marcus saw this as a bottleneck. I saw it as our greatest strength. The first signs of trouble came subtly. Meetings where my detailed reports were glossed over. Gradual restrictions on my access to key research areas. Whispers from junior engineers about streamlining our development process. I'd weathered corporate politics before. During my government research days, I'd seen how short-term thinking could compromise scientific integrity. But clean tech had always been different, or so I believed. Little did I know that the next few weeks would test everything I believed about innovation, integrity, and the true meaning of professional courage. The storm was just beginning to gather, and I was about to be at its very center. The systematic deconstruction of my life's work began with subtle changes. Meetings that once lasted hours, diving deep into technical specifications, were now reduced to 30-minute sprints. Marcus introduced what he called rapid decision-making protocols, a euphemism for cutting corners and ignoring critical nuances. My team started looking nervous. Tom, my senior research engineer, caught me in the break room one afternoon, his usual confidence replaced by a worried expression. "They're pushing us to compress the testing cycles," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "Marcus wants us to reduce prototype validation from 6 months to 6 weeks. I knew exactly what that meant. Compressed testing cycles were a recipe for disaster in our field. Our modular energy systems weren't just another consumer product. They were complex infrastructural solutions that could impact entire communities' energy ecosystems. A single miscalculation could lead to catastrophic failures. Elena noticed the change in me first. Over dinner, she watched me push food around. My plate, my mind elsewhere. "You're carrying something heavy," she said. It wasn't a question. After 23 years of marriage, she could read me like an open book. I explained the situation, how Marcus was systematically dismantling the careful processes we'd developed over years. "He sees our methodology as an obstacle," I told her. To him, innovation is about speed, not substance. My wife, a civil engineer herself, understood the stakes. "Cutting corners in infrastructure design isn't innovation," she replied. "It's negligence." The first real blow came during the quarterly board meeting. Marcus presented a strategic realignment that would effectively decentralize our research process. Instead of our integrated testing approach, he proposed breaking the team into smaller, faster-moving units. Each group would focus on rapid prototyping with minimal cross-verification. I raised my hand. "This approach eliminates our primary safety mechanism," I explained. "Our current model allows comprehensive cross-validation. These proposed changes will create dangerous blind spots." Marcus's smile was razor-thin. "Daniel's concerns represent the old way of thinking," he told the board. "We need to be agile. Our competitors are moving faster, capturing market share while we're still running simulations." I watched as board members nodded. These were financial experts, not engineers. They saw numbers, not potential environmental risks. My access to key research systems began to get restricted. Custom permissions I'd maintained for years were suddenly revoked. The laboratory that had been my sanctuary for over a decade was becoming unfamiliar, controlled by protocols I hadn't designed. James, our junior systems engineer, approached me with a USB drive one afternoon. "I made a backup of the original, validation protocols," he said quietly, "just in case." His gesture spoke volumes about the team's growing unease. The next week, Marcus announced a complete restructuring of our research division. My role was being reimagined, a corporate euphemism that typically precedes professional extinction. Senior positions would be distributed across product teams, effectively dismantling the centralized research approach I'd spent years perfecting. I began documenting everything: emails, meeting notes, technical specifications. Something told me I might need a record of the careful work being casually discarded. My reputation in the environmental engineering community had always been built on integrity. Conferences where I'd been a keynote speaker, now felt distant. The collaborative spirit that had defined my career was being replaced by a ruthless efficiency that valued speed over sustainability. When the official notification came, it was clinical in its precision. A two-page document outlining my transition, a polite term for professional displacement. My team was being scattered, our collective expertise fragmented into small, disconnected units. Elena found me in my home office that evening, surrounded by 15 years of research documents. "They have no idea what they're destroying," I said, my voice a mixture of anger and profound sadness. "No," she replied, "but they will." The next morning, I received a cryptic email from Robert Chang at the Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council. "We should talk," it read. "Some bridges, once burned, create entirely new pathways." I didn't know it then, but everything was about to change. The first reports came in like a slow-moving tsunami. A renewable energy project in New Mexico, one of the first to adopt the rapid prototyping model Marcus had championed, had catastrophically failed. I was working in my home office when the initial news alerts started popping up. Solar infrastructure, deployed in a rural community, had experienced multiple system failures. Initial reports suggested potential environmental contamination and complete power grid instability. My phone began to buzz. Colleagues, former students, industry contacts, everyone wanted my perspective, but I remained silent, watching the story unfold. The project had been one of the first implemented after our team's restructuring. Instead of the comprehensive multi-phase testing we'd always conducted, they'd used the accelerated deployment model Marcus had introduced. 6-week validation cycles replaced our previous 6-month rigorous testing protocols. Within 72 hours, the story exploded. Independent environmental assessments revealed significant structural failures in the solar array system. The rapid deployment had overlooked critical geological considerations specific to the New Mexican desert landscape. Thermal expansion rates, ground stability, water table interactions, all the nuanced factors our original research team would have meticulously analyzed had been glossed over. Elena found me surrounded by printouts, technical diagrams spread across my office floor. "They didn't listen," I muttered, more to myself than to her. The fallout was immediate and devastating. The renewable energy startup responsible for the project faced immediate regulatory scrutiny. Stock prices plummeted. Investor confidence evaporated. But more critically, an entire community was left without stable power infrastructure, with potential long-term environmental consequences. Robert Chang's email took on new significance. When we met for coffee at a quiet Portland cafe, his expression was a mixture of professional concern and barely contained frustration. "This is exactly what we've been warning about," he said, sliding a technical report across the table. "Accelerated development cycles in critical infrastructure aren't innovation. They're Russian roulette with environmental and community stability." The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had been tracking similar incidents across multiple sectors. My dismantled team at Cleantech wasn't an isolated case. It was part of a broader trend of prioritizing speed over substantive innovation. "They're treating complex environmental solutions like smartphone apps," I observed. "You can't debug a solar grid the way you patch software." Marcus Reynolds, meanwhile, was conspicuously quiet. Cleantech's communication channels remained silent, hoping the story would blow over. But in the age of instant information, silence only amplified suspicion. Industry publications began digging deeper. Investigative journalists started connecting dots, revealing a pattern of rushed deployments and overlooked technical considerations across multiple renewable energy projects. My phone rang. It was Tom, my former senior research engineer. "They're Asking questions, he said, about our old validation protocols, about why we did things the way we did. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very processes Marcus had deemed inefficient were now being scrutinized as potential gold standards of responsible technological deployment. Social media exploded with discussions about technological accountability. Engineers, environmental, scientists and community advocates began sharing our team's previous research, highlighting the importance of comprehensive testing. Within 2 weeks, 3 major renewable energy projects were put on immediate hold. Regulatory bodies started, demanding more comprehensive pre-deployment assessments. The rapid prototyping model was being dismantled almost as quickly as it had been implemented. Elena watched me process everything, her engineering background helping her understand the deeper implications. "You were never just protecting a process," she said. "You were protecting communities." The phone call from the Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. They were forming a special task force to develop new infrastructure deployment guidelines. My expertise, they said, would be critical. As I looked out my office window, watching rain trace patterns on the glass, I realized something profound. Professional integrity isn't about winning arguments, it's about protecting possibilities, the potential futures we create through careful, thoughtful innovation. The story was far from over, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of hope. The invitation arrived in a plain manila envelope, bearing the letterhead of the Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council. Inside, a formal request that would reshape my entire professional trajectory. "We need someone who understands the fundamental architecture of responsible innovation," Robert Chang had said during our previous meeting. Now, they were making it official. A comprehensive review and redesign of infrastructure deployment protocols, with me at the helm. Clean Tech had officially terminated my employment 2 weeks after the New Mexico project disaster. The severance package was generous, but it felt like a consolation prize for dismantling years of carefully constructed work. My non-compete clause was surprisingly narrow, leaving me room to consult and collaborate. Elena suggested I take some time to decompress, but sitting idle was never my strength. The failed renewable energy project had exposed systemic weaknesses that ran far deeper than one company's misguided approach. The task force assembled was unlike any I'd seen before. Experts from diverse fields, environmental scientists, industrial, engineers, policy developers, community advocates, all united by a single mission: rebuild technological deployment processes with genuine integrity. Our first meeting happened in a converted warehouse in downtown Portland. Floor-to-ceiling whiteboards stood ready, technological diagrams and complex flowcharts waiting to be mapped. Each participant brought years of hard-earned expertise and a shared frustration with the current innovation model. Dr. Elena Martinez, a climate adaptation specialist from Berkeley, presented startling data. "We're seeing a 40% increase in technological failure rates across critical infrastructure projects," she explained. "The faster we try to move, the more catastrophic the potential consequences." Her presentation highlighted multiple case studies. Beyond the renewable energy sector, transportation systems, urban planning initiatives, water management technologies, all suffering from the same fundamental problem. Speed was being prioritized over substantive, holistic understanding. Tom, my former senior research engineer, had joined the task force. His presence was both a comfort and a reminder of what we'd lost at CleanTech. "We're not just creating guidelines," he said during one intense planning session. "We're redefining the entire philosophy of technological innovation." Weeks turned into months of rigorous analysis. We developed a comprehensive framework that went beyond traditional testing protocols. Our approach wasn't about slowing innovation, but about ensuring its responsible, sustainable implementation. The media began taking notice. Technology journals started publishing preliminary insights from our work. Marcus Reynolds and Cleantech became case studies of what happens when innovation loses its ethical foundation. Funding came from unexpected sources. Progressive technology foundations, forward-thinking investment groups, and several governmental agencies recognized the critical nature of our work. We weren't just creating guidelines, we were potentially reshaping entire industries. My relationship with Elena deepened during this period. She understood the technical complexities, but more importantly, she understood the human element driving our work. Real innovation, she would say, happens at the intersection of technology and human experience. The task force's preliminary report was a watershed moment. We outlined a multi-stage validation process that incorporated not just technical parameters, but broader environmental and community impact assessments. Machine learning algorithms would work alongside human expertise, creating a dynamic, responsive framework. Conferences invited me to speak, not as a cautionary tale, but as a pioneer reimagining technological deployment. The very processes that had cost me my job at Cleantech were now being celebrated as a breakthrough approach. Marcus Reynolds' career, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale. After the New Mexico project disaster, his reputation in the technology sector was in tatters. Venture capital firms that once courted him now kept their distance. Our task force's work caught the attention of international policymakers. Preliminary discussions began about potentially establishing these guidelines as standard practice across multiple infrastructure and technology sectors. "We're not just protecting technology," Robert Chang said during one strategy meeting. "We're protecting communities, ecosystems, and future possibilities." As the year drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional devastation had transformed into an opportunity to create meaningful, systemic change. The small team that Marcus had so casually dismantled was now at the forefront of a global conversation about responsible innovation. The phone rang. Another invitation, another opportunity to reshape how we think about technological progress. I looked at Elena, who smiled knowingly. Our work was just beginning. The invitation to speak at the International Sustainable Technologies Conference arrived on a crisp autumn morning. Conference organizers wanted me to deliver the keynote address, a testament to how dramatically my professional landscape had transformed. 3 years had passed since my unceremonious departure from Cleantech. The task force we'd formed had become a global benchmark for responsible technological innovation. Our framework had been adopted by governments and private sectors across multiple continents. Preparing the keynote speech became a deeply reflective process. Elena helped me organize my thoughts, challenging me to look beyond the technical details and explore the human narrative of innovation. "This isn't just about technology," she reminded me. "It's about the stories we tell ourselves about progress." The conference was held in Vancouver, a city that had become a global leader in sustainable urban development. Delegates from 47 countries filled the massive convention center. Technology leaders, environmental scientists, policymakers, all gathered to discuss the future of responsible innovation. When I took the stage, the room fell silent. I could see Tom in the front row, along with several members of our original task force. Robert Chang sat near the back, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Innovation isn't a race," I began. "It's a conversation, a dialogue between human potential and environmental responsibility." I shared the story of the New Mexico project, not as a moment of professional vindication, but as a critical learning opportunity. I spoke about the dangers of prioritizing speed over substance, of treating complex technological solutions as if they were disposable consumer products. The audience was captivated. Each point resonated with professionals who had witnessed similar failures across various sectors. My narrative wasn't about blame, but about collective learning and growth. During the Q&A session, a young engineer from Brazil asked a question that captured the essence of our work. How do we balance innovation with responsibility? Her voice trembled slightly, a mixture of passion and uncertainty. I shared the framework we'd developed, a dynamic model that integrated technological potential with comprehensive risk assessment, machine learning algorithms working in concert with human expertise, creating a responsive, adaptive approach to innovation. The conference wasn't just a speaking engagement. It was a celebration of a fundamentally different approach to technological development. Journalists from technology publications swarmed me after the keynote. Interviews stretched late into the evening. My phone buzzed continuously with messages from colleagues around the world. An unexpected call came from an unlikely source. Jennifer, my former CTO at Cleantech, the one who had understood the importance of our original approach, reached out. "You were right," she said simply. "We lost sight of what really matters." The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had transformed from a task force to a recognized global authority. Our guidelines were now standard practice in multiple industries. Universities were developing entire academic programs based on our approach. Marcus Reynolds had essentially disappeared from the technology landscape. The once celebrated CEO found himself unable to secure meaningful leadership positions after the New Mexico project disaster. Back home, Elena and I celebrated quietly, not with grand gestures, but with a simple dinner and conversation about the potential futures we were helping to create. The task force had become something more than a professional initiative. We were reimagining the very concept of technological progress. Invitations continued to pour in. Speaking engagements, consulting opportunities, collaborative research projects. But we were selective. Quality over quantity remained our guiding principle. Tom had become a key leader in our organization, his expertise and passion driving our continued evolution. The team that had been dismantled was now stronger and more influential than ever. Our work extended beyond technology. We were creating a new narrative about human potential, one that valued thoughtful, responsible progress over blind acceleration. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional catastrophe had become an opportunity to create meaningful, systemic change. The phone rang. Another invitation, another chance to reshape how we think about innovation and human potential. I looked at Eleanor, who understood everything without a word being spoken. Our work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The Bloomberg investigative piece landed like a thunderbolt across the technology and sustainability sectors. The true cost of speed, how rushed innovation threatens global infrastructure. The headline stretched across the front page of their digital edition. Journalists had spent months piecing together the story that began with the New Mexico renewable energy project failure. Our task force's work had inadvertently become the centerpiece of a much larger narrative about technological accountability. The article meticulously documented the systemic issues that had plagued technology deployment across multiple sectors. From renewable energy to urban infrastructure, the pattern was consistent. Companies prioritized speed and market share over comprehensive testing and responsible development. I received a call from Robert Chang early that morning. "They've connected all the dots," he said, a mixture of professional satisfaction and concern in his voice. "This isn't just about one project anymore. This is about a fundamental shift in how we approach technological innovation." The Bloomberg piece didn't just highlight failures. It presented our framework as a comprehensive solution, a roadmap for responsible technological development. Interviews with task force members, including Tom and myself, provided an in-depth look at the human story behind the guidelines. Elena watched me process the article, her engineering background helping her understand the deeper implications. "This is bigger than we imagined," she observed, and she was right. Within 48 hours, the article had been shared millions of times. Technology leaders, environmental advocates, and policymakers began discussing our approach with unprecedented intensity. Invitations began pouring in. Government agencies from multiple countries requested detailed briefings. Top-tier universities wanted to develop academic programs based on our research. Technology companies sought consultations to redesign their innovation processes. The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council transformed almost overnight. What had started as a small task force became a global advisory organization with unprecedented influence. Our approach wasn't about slowing innovation, it was about making innovation meaningful, responsible, and truly impactful. We developed a comprehensive scoring system that evaluated technological projects beyond traditional metrics of speed and market potential. The scoring framework considered multiple dimensions: environmental impact, community sustainability, long-term, scalability, ethical considerations, potential unintended consequences. Technology companies that had previously ignored such comprehensive assessments now found themselves competing. To demonstrate their commitment to responsible innovation, universities began developing new academic tracks. Engineering programs started incorporating our framework into core curricula. The next generation of innovators would be trained to think beyond immediate market pressures. An unexpected call came from an international climate conference. They wanted me to present our framework as a potential global standard for technological development in critical infrastructure sectors. Tom had become a key strategist in our organization. His technical expertise, combined with a deep understanding of systemic challenges, made him invaluable. The team that had been dismantled at Cleantech was now at the forefront of a global conversation about responsible innovation. The technology sector began to change. Venture capital firms started using our assessment framework as a key metric for investment decisions. Companies that demonstrated comprehensive, responsible approach to innovation found themselves more attractive to investors. Our work extended far beyond technology. We were creating a new narrative about human potential, one that valued thoughtful, comprehensive progress over blind acceleration. Marcus Reynolds, the CEO who had initially dismantled our team, found himself increasingly irrelevant. The aggressive, speed-driven approach to innovation he had championed was being systematically rejected by the industry. During a global technology summit in Geneva, I found myself surrounded by leaders from various sectors. They weren't just seeking advice. They were looking for a fundamental reimagining of technological progress. "We've been asking the wrong questions," I told them. "Innovation isn't about how fast we can move. It's about how meaningfully we can create change." The personal cost of our journey became increasingly clear. The years of professional struggle, the initial dismissal, the challenging moments of doubt, all had led to this moment of profound transformation. Elena remained my strongest support. She understood that our work was about more than technological guidelines. We were reimagining the relationship between human potential and technological progress. Governments began incorporating our framework into policy guidelines. From renewable energy to urban development, our approach became a benchmark for responsible technological deployment. The task force had become a global movement. What had begun as a response to a single failed project had transformed into a comprehensive approach to innovation that considered human and environmental potential, documentaries, academic papers, technology conferences. Our work was everywhere. But we remained committed to our original principle: quality over quantity, substance over speed. As the year drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional devastation had become an opportunity to create meaningful, systemic change. The phone rang. Another invitation, another chance to reshape how we think about innovation and human potential. I looked at Elena, who understood everything without a word being spoken. Our work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to create real, lasting change. The invitation to testify before the United Nations Sustainable Technology Commission arrived on a rainy Wednesday morning. A formal recognition that our work had transcended corporate boundaries and become a global dialogue about responsible innovation. 5 years had passed since the New Mexico project disaster. The landscape of technological development had transformed dramatically. Our framework had become more than a set of guidelines. It was a fundamental philosophy reshaping how humanity approached technological progress. Preparation for the UN testimony became a deeply collaborative process. Tom, Robert Chang, and our entire team worked tirelessly to distill years of research, experience, and insights into a comprehensive presentation that would challenge global perspectives on innovation. The Commission's headquarters in New York presented an imposing backdrop. Delegates from 193 member nations filled the expansive conference hall. Representatives from technology sectors, environmental organizations, and governmental bodies listened intently as I began my testimony. Innovation is not a sprint, I began. It's a carefully orchestrated marathon that requires understanding, empathy, and a profound respect for human and environmental potential. I detailed the journey that had brought us to this moment, from the initial dismissal at Cleantech to the global recognition of our approach. Each challenge had been a critical learning opportunity. The story wasn't about personal vindication, but about collective growth and understanding. Our framework had revolutionized multiple sectors. Renewable energy projects now incorporated comprehensive environmental and community impact assessments. Urban infrastructure development had been transformed, with technologies evaluated on long-term sustainability rather than immediate market potential. The Bloomberg investigation had been a turning point. The article had exposed the systemic failures inherent in the previous approach to technological development. Companies that once prioritized speed above all else were now adopting our comprehensive evaluation methods. Universities worldwide had developed entire academic tracks based on our approach. Engineering and technology programs now taught a holistic view of innovation that considered environmental, social, and ethical dimensions. During the Q&A session, delegates from developing nations asked particularly insightful questions. How could our framework be adapted to address unique challenges in regions with limited resources? How could responsible innovation support sustainable development? Our response highlighted the framework's adaptability. We had developed region-specific modules that could be tailored to local, environmental, social, and economic contexts. Innovation wasn't about imposing a one-size-fits-all solution, but about creating flexible, responsive approaches. Elena had been instrumental in developing these region-specific adaptations. Her background in civil engineering, combined with a deep understanding of global development challenges, provided critical insights. The technology investment landscape had transformed completely. Venture capital firms now used our comprehensive assessment framework as a primary evaluation tool. Companies demonstrating a commitment to responsible, holistic innovation found themselves more attractive to investors. Marcus Reynolds had become a cautionary tale in technology circles. The once celebrated CEO who had championed speed over substance found himself increasingly marginalized. His approach to innovation was now seen as dangerously outdated. Our work extended far beyond technological guidelines. We were creating a new narrative about human potential, one that valued thoughtful, comprehensive progress over blind acceleration. The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had become a critical global advisory organization. Governments, technology companies, and educational institutions sought our guidance in developing responsible innovation strategies. During a break in the UN proceedings, a young engineer from Kenya approached me. Her eyes burned with passion and possibility. "You've given us a framework to create technologies that truly matter," she said. Those words encapsulated everything we had been working to achieve. Innovation wasn't about creating products, but about solving fundamental human challenges. The testimony lasted nearly 4 hours. By the end, the Commission was preparing draft recommendations that would potentially become global guidelines for technological development. Journalists from international media outlets swarmed us after the presentation. But the real impact was happening quietly, in research labs, university classrooms, and technology companies around the world. Tom had become a key global strategist, our original team now leading a movement that was reshaping how humanity approached a technological progress. The team that had been dismantled at Cleantech was now at the forefront of a global conversation about responsible innovation. An unexpected call came from Jennifer, my former CTO at Cleantech. "We were wrong," she said simply. "You saw something we couldn't see." It was a moment of profound professional reconciliation. The personal cost of our journey became increasingly clear. The years of professional struggle, the initial dismissal, the challenging moments of doubt, all had led to this moment of global recognition. Elena remained my strongest support. She understood that our work was about more than technological guidelines. We were reimagining the relationship between human potential and technological progress. As the day drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional devastation had become an opportunity to create meaningful, systemic, global change. The phone rang. Another invitation. Another chance to reshape how we think about innovation and human potential. I looked at Elena, who understood everything without a word being spoken. Our work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to create real, lasting change on a global scale. The Nobel Committee's call came on a crisp autumn morning, transforming everything we had worked for into a moment of global recognition. Our approach to responsible innovation had been nominated for the Nobel Prize in Sustainable Development, a validation that stretched far beyond personal achievement. 7 years had passed since the New Mexico project disaster. The landscape of global technological development had been fundamentally reshaped by our work. What had begun as a response to a single failed project had become a global movement challenging how humanity approaches innovation. Preparations for the Nobel ceremony became a collaborative effort. Our entire team, Tom, Robert Chang, and countless collaborators, worked tirelessly to distill years of research, struggle, and vision into a presentation that would inspire global change. TICAC, Nobel ceremony in Oslo presented a surreal backdrop. Delegates from scientific, technological, and environmental sectors filled the grand hall. As I prepared to deliver the acceptance speech, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this moment. Elena helped me prepare, her engineering background providing critical insights. "This isn't about personal recognition," she reminded me. "This is about changing how we think about human potential." Our framework had revolutionized multiple global sectors. Renewable energy projects now incorporated comprehensive environmental and community impact assessments. Urban infrastructure development had been transformed, with technologies evaluated on long-term sustainability rather than immediate market potential. The speech would be broadcast to millions worldwide, an opportunity to share a message about responsible innovation that went far beyond technological guidelines. Innovation is a conversation, I began, a dialogue between human potential and environmental responsibility. I detailed the journey from our initial challenges at cleantech to global recognition. Each obstacle had been a critical learning opportunity. The narrative wasn't about personal triumph, but about collective growth and understanding. Universities worldwide had developed entire academic tracks based on our approach. Engineering and technology programs now taught a holistic view of innovation that considered environmental, social, and ethical dimensions. The technology investment landscape had transformed completely. Venture capital firms now used our comprehensive assessment framework as a primary evaluation tool. Companies demonstrating a commitment to responsible, holistic innovation found themselves at the forefront of global development. Representatives from developing nations approached me after the speech. They saw our framework as a pathway to sustainable technological development that respected local contexts and environmental challenges. Our region-specific modules had been particularly transformative. We had developed adaptable guidelines that could be tailored to unique local, environmental, social, and economic contexts. Innovation wasn't about imposing universal solutions, but about creating flexible, responsive approaches. Marcus Reynolds had become a footnote in technological history. The once celebrated CEO who had championed speed over substance found himself increasingly irrelevant. His approach to innovation was now seen as a dangerous relic of an outdated paradigm. The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had become a critical global advisory organization. Governments, technology companies, and educational institutions sought our guidance in developing responsible innovation strategies. During a private moment after the ceremony, a young environmental scientist from Brazil approached me. "You've shown us that technology can be a force for genuine human progress," she said, her eyes reflecting both hope and determination. Those words captured the essence of everything we had been working to achieve. Innovation wasn't about creating products, but about solving fundamental human challenges while respecting environmental and social contexts. Tom had become a key global strategist. Our original team, once dismantled at cleantech, was now leading a movement that was reshaping how humanity approached technological progress. An unexpected reconciliation came from unexpected quarters. Jennifer, my former CTO at cleantech, reached out. "We were blind," she admitted. "You saw a path we couldn't even imagine." The personal cost of our journey became increasingly clear. The years of professional struggle, initial dismissal, and moments of doubt had led to this global recognition. Elena remained my strongest support. She understood that our work was about more than technological guidelines. We were reimagining the relationship between human potential and technological progress. Our framework had become a global standard. International organizations, governments, and educational institutions used our approach as a benchmark for responsible technological development. The Nobel Prize was more than a personal honor. It was a recognition that innovation must be approached with comprehensive understanding, empathy, and a profound respect for human and environmental potential. During the reception, scientists, policymakers, and technology leaders from around the world sought conversations about our approach. The excitement was palpable, a sense that we were at the beginning of a fundamental transformation in how humanity thinks about technological progress. Representatives from the United Nations, discussed potential global implementation of our guidelines. Educational institutions prepared to redesign entire academic programs based on our framework. As the day drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional devastation had become an opportunity to create meaningful, systemic global change. The phone rang, another invitation, another chance to reshape how we think about innovation and human potential. I looked at Elena, who understood everything without a word being spoken. Our work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to create real, lasting change on a global scale. The global pandemic had exposed vulnerabilities in technological infrastructure that our framework had long anticipated. As nations scrambled to develop rapid response technologies, the principles of responsible innovation became more critical than ever. 10 years had passed since the New Mexico project disaster. Our approach to technological development had become a cornerstone of global innovation strategies. What had once been a controversial methodology was now a fundamental approach to solving complex human challenges. The World Health Organization had integrated our comprehensive assessment guidelines into their emergency technology development protocols. Technologies were no longer evaluated solely on speed or immediate applicability, but on long-term sustainability, ethical considerations, and potential unintended consequences. A research facility in South Africa had developed a breakthrough, modular medical infrastructure system based on our framework. The technology could be rapidly deployed in remote areas with built-in adaptability to local environmental and social contexts. During a global technology summit in Singapore, I found myself surrounded by a new generation of innovators. These were not the aggressive, speed-driven technologists of a decade ago. They understood that true innovation was a complex dialogue between human potential and technological capability. Elena had been instrumental in developing our latest initiative, a comprehensive global training program for emerging technologies. Universities from 37 countries had already implemented our curriculum, creating a new generation of innovators with a holistic approach to technological development. Tom led our research team's most ambitious project yet, a predictive modeling system that could anticipate potential technological failures before they occurred. Machine learning algorithms, combined with human expertise, created a dynamic approach to risk assessment that went far beyond traditional evaluation methods. The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had transformed into a global innovation advisory organization. Governments, technology companies, and educational institutions sought our guidance in developing responsible innovation strategies. Our region-specific modules had been particularly transformative in developing nations. We had created adaptable guidelines that respected local environmental, social, and economic contexts. Innovation was no longer about imposing universal solutions, but about creating flexible, responsive approaches that empowered local communities. Breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of young engineers in Kenya developed a water purification technology that could be rapidly deployed in areas with limited infrastructure. The technology incorporated our comprehensive assessment framework, demonstrating how responsible innovation could address critical human challenges. Marcus Reynolds had become a cautionary tale in technology circles, the once celebrated CEO who had championed speed over substance found himself increasingly marginalized. His approach to innovation was now seen as a dangerous relic of an outdated paradigm. International investment patterns had completely transformed. Venture capital firms now used our comprehensive assessment framework as a primary evaluation tool. Companies demonstrating a commitment to responsible, holistic innovation found themselves at the forefront of global development. During a United Nations technology conference, a young environmental scientist from Brazil shared a powerful observation. "You've shown us that technology can be a force for genuine human progress," she said, her voice reflecting both hope and determination. Our work had extended far beyond technological guidelines. We were creating a new narrative about human potential, one that valued thoughtful, comprehensive progress over blind acceleration. An unexpected reconciliation came from Jennifer, my former CTO at Cleantech. "We were completely wrong," she admitted during a private conversation. "You saw a path we couldn't even imagine. The personal cost of our journey became increasingly clear. The years of professional struggle, initial dismissal, and moments of doubt had led to this global transformation of how humanity approached technological development." Elena remained my strongest support. She understood that our work was about more than technological guidelines. We were reimagining the relationship between human potential and technological progress. Universities worldwide had developed entire academic tracks based on our approach. Engineering and technology programs now taught a holistic view of innovation that considered environmental, social, and ethical dimensions. The Nobel Prize had been a turning point, but the real impact was happening quietly. In research labs, university classrooms, and technology companies around the world, a new approach to innovation was taking root. Representatives from developing nations saw our framework as a pathway to sustainable technological development. Our region-specific modules provided a flexible approach that could be adapted to unique local challenges. During a private meeting with global technology leaders, I emphasized a critical point. Innovation isn't about creating products, I explained. It's about solving fundamental human challenges while respecting our planet's delicate ecosystems. The World Economic Forum had integrated our assessment guidelines into their global technology evaluation processes. Technologies were now evaluated on a comprehensive set of criteria that went far beyond traditional market metrics. A research team in Japan had developed a breakthrough earthquake-resistant infrastructure system using our comprehensive assessment approach. The technology demonstrated how responsible innovation could address critical human challenges. As the day drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional devastation had become an opportunity to create meaningful, systemic global change. The phone rang. Another invitation, another chance to reshape how we think about innovation and human potential. I looked at Elena, who understood everything without a word being spoken. Our work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to create real, lasting change on a global scale. The climate crisis had become the defining challenge of our generation. 15 years after the New Mexico Project disaster, our approach to responsible innovation was now a critical tool in humanity's fight against environmental challenges. Technological solutions were no longer evaluated solely on their immediate potential, but on their long-term impact on human and environmental systems. Our framework had become the global standard for addressing complex, interconnected challenges. A groundbreaking project in the Amazon rainforest demonstrated the power of our approach. A collaborative team of indigenous environmental experts, technologists, and climate scientists had developed a revolutionary forest restoration technology. Unlike previous attempts, this solution was deeply rooted in local ecological knowledge and comprehensive environmental assessment. The technology used advanced satellite monitoring, machine learning algorithms, and traditional ecological understanding to create a dynamic forest restoration system. It could adapt to changing environmental conditions, respecting the complex ecosystem of the Amazon while providing sustainable economic opportunities for local communities. Elena had been instrumental in developing the interdisciplinary approach that made such innovations possible. Her work bridging engineering, social sciences, and environmental studies had become a model for comprehensive problem solving. Tom led our most ambitious research initiative yet, a global climate adaptation platform that could predict and mitigate potential environmental challenges. The system integrated data from thousands of sources, creating a dynamic, responsive approach to climate resilience. During a global climate conference in Copenhagen, I found myself addressing a new generation of innovators. These were not the technology enthusiasts of a decade ago. They understood that true innovation was a complex dialogue between human potential, technological capability, and environmental sustainability. The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had evolved into a comprehensive global innovation network. What had begun as a small task force was now a global movement that connected researchers, policymakers, and community leaders from every continent. Our region-specific modules had been particularly transformative in addressing climate challenges. We had created adaptable guidelines that respected local environmental, social, and economic contexts. Innovation was no longer about imposing universal solutions, but about creating flexible, responsive approaches that empowered local communities. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of young engineers in Bangladesh developed a flood-resistant infrastructure system that could protect coastal communities from rising sea levels. The technology incorporated our comprehensive assessment framework, demonstrating how responsible innovation could address critical human challenges. Marcus Reynolds had become a historical footnote. The once celebrated CEO who had championed speed over substance was now studied as a cautionary tale in business schools. His approach to innovation was seen as a dangerous relic of an outdated paradigm. International investment patterns had completely transformed. Venture capital firms now used our comprehensive assessment framework as a primary evaluation tool. Companies demonstrating a commitment to responsible, holistic innovation found themselves at the forefront of global development. During a United Nations climate summit, a young environmental scientist from the Pacific Islands shared a powerful observation. "You've shown us that technology can be a force for genuine human and environmental progress," she said, her voice reflecting both hope and determination. Our work had extended far beyond technological guidelines. We were creating a new narrative about human potential, one that valued thoughtful, comprehensive progress over blind acceleration. An unexpected moment of reconciliation came during a global conference. Jennifer, my former CTO at Cleantech, now led a major international sustainability initiative. "We were completely wrong," she admitted publicly. "Daniel and his team saw a path we couldn't even imagine. The personal cost of our journey became increasingly clear. The years of professional struggle, initial dismissal, and moments of doubt had led to this global transformation of how humanity approached technological development and environmental challenges. Elena remained my strongest support. She understood that our work was about more than technological guidelines. We were reimagining the relationship between human potential, technological progress, and environmental sustainability. Universities worldwide had developed entire interdisciplinary programs based on our approach. Academic tracks now integrated engineering, environmental sciences, social studies, and ethical considerations into a comprehensive approach to innovation. The Nobel Prize had been a turning point, but the real impact was happening in research labs, university classrooms, and community initiatives around the world. A new approach to innovation was not just taking root, it was flourishing. Representatives from indigenous communities had become key partners in our global innovation network. Their traditional knowledge was now recognized as a critical component of technological development, not a footnote to be ignored. During a private meeting with global technology and environmental leaders, I emphasized a critical point. Innovation isn't about creating products, I explained. It's about solving fundamental human challenges while respecting the delicate balance of our planetary ecosystems. The World Economic Forum had integrated our assessment guidelines into their global sustainability and technology evaluation processes. Technologies were now evaluated on a comprehensive set of criteria that considered long-term environmental and social impacts. A research team in New Zealand had developed a breakthrough marine ecosystem restoration technology using our comprehensive assessment approach. The solution demonstrated how responsible innovation could address critical environmental challenges while supporting local communities. As the day drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional devastation had become an opportunity to create meaningful systemic global change. The phone rang. Another invitation, another chance to reshape how we think about innovation, human potential, and our relationship with the planet. I looked at Elena, who understood everything without a word being spoken. Our work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to create real, lasting change on a global scale. 20 years had passed since the New Mexico Project disaster that had fundamentally altered the trajectory of technological innovation. Our approach had become more than a methodology. It was a global philosophy of responsible progress. The International Space Exploration Consortium had recently adopted our comprehensive assessment framework for their most ambitious project yet, a sustainable human settlement initiative on Mars. The project represented the culmination of everything we had been working to achieve, a holistic approach to technological development that considered human potential, environmental challenges, and long-term sustainability. Elena had been instrumental in developing the interdisciplinary protocols for the Mars Settlement Project. Her work bridging engineering, social sciences, and complex systems thinking had become the gold standard for comprehensive problem-solving in extreme environments. Tom led the mission's technological assessment team, bringing together experts from diverse fields: engineers, psychologists, environmental scientists, and community development specialists. The team wasn't just designing a technological solution. They were creating a comprehensive approach to human survival in an alien environment. The project went far beyond traditional space exploration models. Instead of viewing the Mars settlement as a technological challenge, the team approached it as a complex human ecosystem. Every technological solution was evaluated not just on its immediate functionality, but on its long-term impact on human psychological well-being, environmental sustainability, and potential for adaptive growth. During a global conference broadcasting from 3 continents simultaneously, I shared insights into our journey. The audience included researchers, policymakers, and a new generation of innovators who had grown up with our approach to technological development. Innovation is a dialogue, I explained, a continuous conversation between human potential, technological capability, and our broader ecosystem. The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had transformed into a comprehensive global innovation network that transcended traditional boundaries. What had begun as a small task force was now a global movement connecting researchers, policymakers, and community leaders from every continent. Our region-specific modules had been particularly transformative in addressing global challenges. We had created adaptable guidelines that respected local environmental, social, and economic contexts. Innovation was no longer about imposing universal solutions, but about creating flexible, responsive approaches that empowered local communities. Breakthrough Project in the Arctic demonstrated the power of our approach. A collaborative team had developed a climate adaptation technology that could help indigenous communities survive rapidly changing environmental conditions. The solution integrated traditional ecological knowledge with advanced technological capabilities. Marcus Reynolds had become a historical case study in how not to approach technological innovation. Business schools now used his story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing speed over comprehensive understanding. International investment patterns had completely transformed. Venture capital firms used our comprehensive assessment framework as a primary evaluation tool. Companies demonstrating a commitment to responsible, holistic innovation found themselves at the forefront of global development. During a United Nations Global Innovation Summit, a young researcher from a small island nation shared a powerful observation. "You've shown us that technology can be a force for genuine human progress," she said, her voice reflecting both hope and technological sophistication. Our work had extended far beyond technological guidelines. We were creating a new narrative about human potential, one that valued thoughtful, comprehensive progress over blind acceleration. Jennifer, my former CTO at Cleantech, now led a major international sustainability initiative. During a private conversation, she reflected on the transformation. "We were completely blind," she admitted. "Daniel and his team saw a path we couldn't even imagine." The personal cost of our journey became increasingly clear. The years of professional struggle, initial dismissal, and moments of doubt had led to this global transformation of how humanity approached technological development. Elena remained my strongest support. She understood that our work was about more than technological guidelines. We were reimagining the relationship between human potential, technological progress, and our collective future. Universities worldwide had developed comprehensive interdisciplinary programs based on our approach. Academic tracks now integrated engineering, environmental sciences, social studies, and ethical considerations into a holistic approach to innovation. The Nobel Prize had been a turning point, but the real impact was happening in research labs, university classrooms, and community initiatives around the world. A new approach to innovation was not just taking root, it was fundamentally reshaping human potential. Representatives from indigenous communities had become key partners in our global innovation network. Their traditional knowledge was now recognized as a critical component of technological development, not a footnote to be ignored. During a private meeting with global leaders, I emphasized a critical point. Innovation isn't about creating products, I explained. It's about solving fundamental human challenges while respecting the complex systems that sustain life on our planet. The World Economic Forum had integrated our assessment guidelines into their global sustainability and technology evaluation processes. Technologies were now evaluated on a comprehensive set of criteria that considered long-term environmental, social, and human impacts. As the day drew to a close, I reflected on the journey. What had seemed like a professional devastation had become an opportunity to create meaningful, systemic global change. The phone rang. Another invitation, another chance to reshape how we think about innovation, human potential, and our collective future. I looked at Elena, who understood everything without a word being spoken. Our work was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to create real, lasting change on a planetary scale. 30 years had passed since that fateful day when a new CEO tried to dismantle everything I believed about responsible innovation. As I stood on the stage of the Global Innovation Summit, I realized our journey had been about far more than technological progress. It had been about reimagining human potential. The auditorium was filled with a new generation of innovators, scientists and change-makers from every corner of the globe. They represented a world transformed by the principles we had championed, a world where innovation was no longer measured by speed, but by its capacity to solve fundamental human challenges. Elena sat in the front row, her eyes reflecting the same passion that had driven us through decades of challenge and transformation. Our partnership had been the foundation of everything we'd achieved, a testament to the power of collaborative, holistic thinking. Tom, now a global leader in sustainable innovation, introduced me to the audience. Daniel Harper, he began, showed us that true innovation is a conversation, not a competition. My keynote address would be my final public presentation before retiring. 30 years of work had culminated in a global movement that had fundamentally reshaped how humanity approached technological development. I spoke about our journey, from the initial challenges at cleantech to the global transformation we had helped create. The story wasn't about personal triumph, but about collective human potential. Innovation begins with understanding, I told the audience. It's about recognizing that every technological solution is part of a larger, more complex ecosystem. We had created more than a framework. We had started a global dialogue about the true purpose of technological development. The Mars settlement project, the climate adaptation technologies, the sustainable infrastructure solutions, these were more than achievements. They were proof that a different approach was possible. The Global Sustainable Infrastructure Council had become a global network that transcended traditional boundaries. What had begun as a small team of passionate individuals had transformed into a movement that connected researchers, policymakers, and community leaders across continents. Our region-specific modules had revolutionized how technologies were developed and implemented. No longer were universal solutions imposed. Instead, technologies were created in deep conversation with local contexts, respecting environmental, social, and cultural nuances. A young researcher from an indigenous community in the Amazon approached me after the presentation. "You showed us that our traditional knowledge is not a barrier to innovation," she said, "but a critical component of solving global challenges." Marcus Reynolds, the CEO who had once tried to dismantle our approach, had long since faded into obscurity. The technology world now understood that innovation was not about speed, but about depth, understanding, and holistic thinking. International investment patterns had been completely transformed. Venture capital firms now used our comprehensive assessment framework as their primary evaluation tool. Companies were judged not just on their immediate potential, but on their capacity to create meaningful, sustainable solutions. The World Economic Forum had integrated our guidelines into global sustainability and technology evaluation processes. Technologies were now assessed on comprehensive criteria that considered long-term human, environmental, and social impacts. Jennifer, my former CTO at Cleantech, now led a global sustainability initiative. During a private moment, she reflected on our journey. "We were blind," she admitted. "You saw a path we couldn't even imagine." Universities around the world had developed comprehensive interdisciplinary programs based on our approach. Engineering was no longer just about technical solutions, but about understanding complex human and environmental systems. The Nobel Prize had been a turning point, but the real impact had been happening in research labs, university classrooms, and community initiatives around the world. A new approach to innovation had not just taken root, it had fundamentally reshaped human potential. As I concluded my speech, I looked directly at the audience. "This is not the end of our journey," I said. "This is just the beginning." To the listeners watching this story, this journey of transformation, I have a message for you. If you believe in the power of responsible innovation, if you understand that true progress is about more than speed, then you are part of this movement. Subscribe to our channel. Follow our work. Share these stories of how innovation can truly change the world, because the next breakthrough, the next solution to a global challenge might just come from you. Every great transformation begins with a single moment of understanding. Every revolution starts with a conversation. This is our conversation, and it's just beginning. Elena squeezed my hand as we left the stage. The work continues.